guys, it's Holly here for PlayStation Access. Now, probably one of the biggest games from the PlayStation conference at Paris Games Week was Spider-Man.
Oh, thank you.
Now, I really had to I was like, I need to talk to someone about Spider-Man. I don't even know if you work on it. You've got the hoodie. I've assumed you work on Spider-Man.
I just serve drinks here, so I don't know. But that was a cool trailer, right?
It was a cool trailer. It was. In fact, it was probably the most story-heavy we've had to date. We've had lots of web slinging, lots of combat, but you've really gone in on the story. Can you give us some idea of how story-focused it is? Are we talking linear story path, or you can take breaks, go explore?
So, it's certainly a free roaming game where you can explore New York City. It's a Marvel's New York City. But, this is Marvel. It's super story focused because, these are amazing characters, Spider-Man, Peter Parker, MJ, Aunt May, Mr. Negative, Kingpin. So, story's key. And we're telling the story of a 23-year-old Peter Parker who's been Spider-Man for 8 years. He's taken the Kingpin down. He's kind of thinking, hey, it's hard juggling my life. I have a job. I have personal relationships. I have to be Spider-Man. I'm juggling all of this. Maybe I can take a step back now that the Kingpin's behind bars. But as we know, Mr. Negative is maybe his biggest threat he's ever faced, and makes him rethink that line of thought.
Now, because it is a beautiful New York City you guys are creating, can we go and explore any of the big sites, the really famous landmarks, and get inside them, or are we just going to be crawling around them?
So, it's I won't say where and what, but you have the island of Manhattan. It's the biggest open world game we've made. It's huge. There's a lot of stuff there to go and do and swing around, use your web swinging and parkour abilities to get around, and you'll see, and I will note, it's Marvel's New York.
Right,
so you may want to watch that trailer and look at those landscapes of New York, because there might be some Easter eggs there if you're careful.
Everyone's not going to stop watching this and they're going to go back and watch your trailer. Thanks for that.
You could just edit it over the top of it right here. Right?
We've got to find them though. That's the problem. We probably won't do a very good job. Let's talk about Miles then.
Sure.
What part is he playing then? Because you've just said this is Peter's story.
Yeah, so it's definitely Peter's story, but Miles is an awesome character. We love Miles. If you don't know Miles, hopefully you love him after you see him in our game. But he lets us show a different side of Peter, and he definitely has his role to play. And I can't spoil too much more, but as you saw in the trailer, after E3, people are like, oh, Miles is in this universe. What does that mean? But in this trailer, we're revealing, oh, Peter and Miles know each other. And not only that, Miles is now helping Aunt May at the feast shelter, which, of course, is what Martin Lee runs. And Martin Lee is Mr. Negative. So, as you know, the best Spider-Man stories are when Peter and Spider-Man's worlds collide. And not only is Miles in the thick of that, but so is Aunt May.
Now, maybe I'm reading slightly too much into it, but it wasn't necessarily clear who was putting the suit on in the trailer.
Well, that's definitely Peter, because that's Peter's apartment.
Right, there you go. Okay,
so as you know, we saw Peter's apartment. We saw, you may have seen, there's a poster on the back wall there from his, early days. That's one important thing. We aren't telling the origin story of Spider-Man in this game, but we do want you to know the history of our Spider-Man. So things like that poster showing his days where he was wrestling for money as Spider-Man and things like that are important.
So there was a lot of, because it was a story trailer, there was a lot of Peter, not Spider-Man, but Peter in this trailer as well. Do you play as Peter a lot, or is it really just to punctuate the story?
So you will spend moments playing as Peter for sure. Obviously, the core of the game, people want to play as Spider-Man, right?
I mean, it's a
you
Spider-Man
want to
game.
swing around the world and do stuff as Spider-Man, but there's important moments where you're going to play as Peter, and you will have that perspective in the world and do things as Peter.
So let's talk about Mr. Negative then. Why this particular character? Did you sit at the studio and just look at the list and go, which one of these do we think is the most engaging, the one we'd love to explore?
Yeah, I don't know if it was like that or it's just, there's so many to choose from. It's great, but Dan Slott's Mr. Negative, if you don't know who he is, he's a newer Spider-Man villain from last 15 years or so in the comics. He's terrific. He's a lot of fun. And like I said, it goes back to that worlds colliding thing. Mr. Negative is this philanthropist, Martin Lee. He runs these homeless shelters in the city. He's this great person who's doing these great things. Aunt May works for him. Peter Parker knows Martin Lee. And so having a character that collides with both Peter Parker knowing Martin Lee and then Spider-Man and Mr. Negative lets us play into those things. And it's one that you haven't seen in a game or a movie before told in this way. So it's kind of a new, fresh thing. And that was something really important for us. We were going to take characters like MJ and put a fresh spin on her. MJ's a reporter at the Daily Bugle. Peter Parker's 23 and has a job, but then we're also going to take characters you may not know very well, like Mr. Negative, and bring them to the forefront as well.
That sounds awesome. So is it really about Mr. Negative? It's not a multiple villains, because obviously we see Kingpin really briefly in that trailer.
You saw the Shocker too.
Yeah, well, yes, we did.
Shocker.
Someone did point that out.
There are more villains. It wouldn't be we'll get into that more as we get closer to launch.
I've tried.
But again, we saw 3 there, and lots of interesting characters in the world.
Now then, let's talk about MJ, because you just brought her up briefly.
Yeah.
From the perspective that trailer was shot, it almost looked like you were playing as MJ.
Yeah, you will play as MJ in key moments of the game as well.
So with Spider-Man doing his thing in the background, I love that flip.
Yeah, so she plays very differently, obviously, because Spider-Man is obviously Spider-Man, and if you're MJ, you're doing different things. But as a reporter, she kind of she's got a nose for the story, and she knows there's stuff going on in New York, and she's involved in part of it. And so exploring that dynamic between MJ, who's this really talented, successful reporter, and Spider-Man / Peter Parker, how does that intersect? How does personal relationship versus the professional relationship work? Just other really fun stuff to play with.
Play as anyone else then? Maybe play as Miles?
You'll have to play the game to find out.
I tried. Yeah. Right. Well, thank you very, very much for your time. For someone who's just serving coffee here, I mean, you've answered those questions brilliantly.
Yeah, obviously I've learned a lot in the last 8 hours serving coffee
I will say James is the communications director at Insomniac, so I'm very, very thankful that I was literally able to pluck you and be like, please do an interview with this.
Sorry, I heard someone call for an espresso. So
You've got to go. Okay. Guys, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe.